Hi there, everybody. It's Bill Whittle in Stratosphere Lounge, episode 111. 111 episodes. That's absolutely astonishing. Sorry about the hair. Looks like I got hit by lightning, but sometimes the dryness and the static out here just does what it does. That's all there is to it. I hope everybody's doing well. Two in a row. Two shows in 2 weeks, just like in the olden days before I had all this stuff to do. But, man, it's good to be back and good to be here, and I have... got a couple little videos to show for this evening before we get started. Got some great questions as always from the Peanut Gallery, and as usual, it's like I say, it's just really great to be here. And been a busy week, been a busy break. Still working on that website redo. We were hoping to have it by January 1st, but some tasks are just not attainable. And it's going to be, I'm quite sure it's going to be quite lovely. And as I said, we're bringing back Firewall. That's exciting. Actually going to do a poll, I think. It might be a members-only poll on what that first topic is going to be. I want to get into Bernie a little bit, the wisdom of Bernie Sanders and his and some of his amazing tweets. Just a remarkable, astonishing depth of the guy, and all of his believers and all of his followers. So yeah, it'll be fun. Looking forward to getting Firewall back. We'll bring a couple new graphics into that, and we got a new show, as I said, called Nexus Report, which will be shot, every day. In negotiations, not behind me here on the Dave Bowman wall, but back that away, is our office space where Carla and everybody in the, 735 people down on the cubicle deck, where they get the actual work done. But behind that wall back there is another empty space. I think I said before, the rental space in this building goes back to the next county, and then there's a whole floor above us that's completely empty too. And I want to get that room back there and set up a permanent green screen facility instead of just shooting up against the wall here. So I can just go on and turn on the lights and get going. So we'll shoot firewalls back there, and we'll shoot time over targets, and we'll shoot some Nexus reports. And I want to do some more interviews, Skype interviews, which is one of our questions tonight. We'll get to that in a second. But before then, I have a couple things to show you. I think I mentioned last episode, I got, I got to stop posting deadlines. They're not actually deadlines, actually. Rich, they're more suggestions. They're more like a non-specified coming soon teaser. That's probably the best way to think of it. Coming soon to a theater near you without a release date. That's generally the way I would do it. And as people know, there's such a thing here as bill time. So there you go. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the stuff we did. I was out stressed like crazy last week because I had to run out of the show and go pick up my my nephew and my sister. Took them up to Big Bear, and I've never seen snow like that. There was a huge storm came through here, huge. And then it cleared up, and that's the day we went up there last Friday. This nephew of mine looks an awful lot like my brother. My lifelong friend Fritz says he sees a lot of me in him. We'll see. So here's just a little tiny little thing I threw together. First one and then another. But this is just from last weekend with my little nephew Ashton. And you might want to watch the volume. I wasn't able to adjust it, and it might be a little loud. So brace yourselves. Give yourself a second just to be ready to get that down. But here's what I did last weekend. There's a little highlights thing, and two of them. Then I'll come back. Okay, ready? And here we go.
Hello everybody, this is Ashton, and today I am at California with my Uncle Bill. You might have seen him on YouTube, and if you haven't, check out his channel. It's Bill Whittle. I'm in the mountains going to Big Bear. So I'm just gonna take a little video of the snow, and I'm gonna take a video of me playing maybe a snowball fight and going in my new saucer. See? My new saucer. Okay. And I'll take a video of that, so stay tuned. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Ashton. And today I'm going to be playing in the snow of California. And you really can't see, but there's like a mountain, and I'm gonna be sliding down it with my inner tube, and it's gonna be really fun. and Bill doesn't have an inner tube, so we're both gonna go on the same inner tube. We are going up a little mountain, and then I'm gonna go on the raft. I'm gonna go on the raft, this raft, and then I'm gonna go slide down.
Whoa!
We're gonna crash.
Quickly, please. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
That boy's a natural, I'm telling you. He's a natural. He's got camera presence. That little Ashton. He's got his own YouTube channel that I set up for him, and he's all about the hits. And I'm going to put together like a trip of, kind of a video of the whole trip, and just generally show him off a little bit, because he's just a sweet, sweet, sweet kid, and very, very, very smart, and just the nicest kid you could possibly imagine. So. Yeah, that's my nephew, Ashley. That's what I did. That's what I did last time. It was up at Big Bear, Rhonda. That's exactly right. We're up at Big Bear. I've never seen snow like that. And we were up there for 24 hours. We got up there. It was sunny, and brand new. 2, 3, 4 feet of snow. He'd never been in snow before ever. He grew up in Florida. He's never, ever, ever been in the snow. And then right around Saturday afternoon, a storm came in right around 3 o'clock today. And on Saturday, rather, on that second day, and we came back down and had an absolute blast. So so that was that. Now here's something that I meant to do, I don't know, for the last 5, 6 episodes. This was probably back in early December, late November, early December, but I haven't done any shown any flying videos lately. One of the nice things about snow on the mountains is it is absolutely spectacular to go shoot. So even though most of that snow is starting to melt now, I might wait for another storm to come through, but I'm going to take a bunch of GoPro cameras up on the Long Easy and shoot the mountains. Nothing like running a mountain ridge. And you have to know how to do that, by the way. That's not something you want to do if you haven't any experience. But as a glider pilot, I got started in the mountains, in the San Gabriel Mountains, and we were getting ridge lift. In the wintertime, there's no thermal lift in the winter, so if you're going to fly gliders in the winter, no thermal lift in the winter, because the thermal lift's in the summer. So if you want to fly in the winter, you have to fly close to the mountain to get the ridge lift. So I'll hopefully get to do that. I might get to shoot some tomorrow or the next day, hopefully over the weekend, and I might have to wait for another snow thing to come in. But anyway, this is just a video I shot. I was up in Livermore, California, I don't know, about a little over a month ago. And shot some footage on the way back. And this is the California coast up by, this is Morro Bay you're about to see, Morro Rock. And I think I can, hopefully I set it up on the Worst Produced Show on the internet to be able to narrate over it. So here's a little bit of Long Easy footage. And again, I'm sorry if the background noise is low. I started to try and take it down a little bit. But anyway, this is kind of cool. So this is my flight from Livermore back to California along the coast, and hopefully I can narrate it. Here we go. So that's Morro Rock there. It's Morro Bay on the left. And I like to make the steep turns around there. It's just really fun. It's an incredible sight. So we're probably doing, we're well over 200 miles an hour. We're probably doing 190, almost 200 knots downhill. And we'll crank it around a little bit. And then you get this lovely little inlet in there, that nice little marina, that harbor. There's a pier down there. And then just kind of followed the coast a little further south. Got to dissolve in here to cut the time, because it was about a 12-minute flight. So that's just north of Pismo Beach. And beautiful little bay in there. And just a beautiful day. Couldn't ask for a nice day, really. Nice and smooth day. And I think the next dissolve will take us down to actual Pismo Beach, which I've spent a lot of time on the ground on, because there's just so much fun. You'll see the sand dunes here towards the end of this next segment, and they're just fantastic for ATV riding. Just an absolute blast. So let's get into that dissolve there again. There we go. So, yeah, this is Pismo Beach at sunset, and again, we're probably 600 feet above the deck, and we're doing easily 180 knots, so darn near 200 miles an hour, and just doing a bunch of kind of heavy rolls so that I had to actually roll left so you could see the beach, and then of course you have to roll right again because you're not allowed to fly directly over the people. But that's just so much fun to do. I just can't tell you how much fun that is. And coming out of it, I think we'll do a final turn, like a high G pull-up out over the dunes. You can see all those sand dunes down there, and that's not the half of them. I mean, they are just, when you're down there on the ground, especially up ahead off the nose up there, you ride to the top of a ridge line, and you think, oh, well, maybe there's another sand dune after this. And you go to that sand dune, and then there's more sand dunes, and then it's like being on the moon. It's absolutely a blast. I can't tell you how much fun it is. It's absolutely incredibly fun. So here's the final turn, I think. Yep, coming in over the dunes, 700 feet, just legal distance above those people down there. And roll out of that, and on that, heading straight back, that'll get us to Santa Barbara and back home. So there's the moon up there. So that was an awful fun day. And I'm going to get a lot more flying video involved. I'm looking forward to getting that plane recanopied, getting a new engine monitor in there, and doing a few things to kind of gear it up. So I can't stay super, super late tonight. I think we can go 2-hour show till about 8 or so. Yeah, I just could not be happier with that airplane. I just love it. It got off to a rocky start, but that wasn't its fault. Yeah, it's just absolutely spectacular. So I'm just going to take these questions. Some of these questions are terrific, but they're really long. So I may do a little skipping, but you'll get the general idea. Okay, here we go. For episode 111, we'll start with Brent Cates. The last Bill Steffen show was amazing. Now, interrupting here, I don't know if he's talking about the last one I posted on my Facebook page, but sorry. Oh yeah, okay. I did one just a couple days ago that he has posted, but I will post on my Facebook page probably over the weekend. And I just love talking to the guy. It's interesting, a couple people in the Facebook comments, let me finish the question for God's sakes. The last Bill Steffen show was amazing. It was a blend of energy, humor, and insight that makes the Stratosphere Lounge so amazing, coupled with Steffen's own analysis of culture, philosophy, and criticism. Please tell me there's more of them. There is. I've shot one that I haven't posted on my Facebook page yet, but I will. I'll probably save it for the weekend because we have a bunch of trifectas and an afterburner coming up, which is about the lottery, which I'm not in favor of. For those of you who were just kind enough a second ago to say if you win the lottery, you'll hire me as a flight instructor. I'm sorry, that was Scott Mazurski, and help fund Aurora. I make a case against the lottery, and Scott, it's nothing personal. Hopefully, you'll understand where I'm going with it, because basically the argument I make in the afterburner is if I'd waited for the lottery to win my jet airplane, I never would have worked as hard as I did to get the real airplane. But back to the Steffen issue. We did another one that was just kind of around the world look at what's going on. Steffen and I agree on virtually everything. I frankly, perfectly honest with you, I'd never heard of the guy before I did the first show with him. Anonymous conservative who wrote the RK book asked me to go on the show on his behalf and talk a little bit about RK. And then the second I heard about Steffen and saw some of his videos, I watched a bunch. And he's a terrific guy. He's a lot more libertarian than I am. And, we've just basically agreed to disagree because whenever there's something that he or that I say that he doesn't particularly agree with, he just lets it go. I think we're going to probably do a show now that we've done 4. I think the 3 plus the one I'm about to post. I think what I'll probably do is do a show about libertarianism versus conservatism, because at this point, I think I wouldn't call us friends, but I feel like he's my friend, and we certainly have a lot of respect for each other. So I think we could probably do a show about the disagreements and the agreements, because I think despite the disagreements, conservatives and libertarians are 90% aligned. Well, they're 100% aligned on 90% of the things, and on the things that they're not aligned about, okay. So, yes, there are some more comments, Brent, and the one we just did was very, very good. I saw a couple things. He's done a number of them on intelligence, on the role of intelligence in social structure and so on. And I've read a lot about this. I didn't know he was such a I don't want to say an advocate of this, but this is something his territory he's marched over before, and I think that'd be a fun one to play with. But I love talking to him. He's a really smart guy, and he has a lot of great things to say, and it's fun kind of being interviewed as well as interviewing. So yeah, definitely more coming, Brent. So Randy Schnickel has a question. There's a new veteran-made film called Range 15, which was created by the owners of two veteran-owned clothing companies, Ranger Up and Article 15. And this movie is going to star primarily some of the veterans of both stores, Nick Palmisano and Matt Best, M-Best 11X, I guess. He was a former Ranger, by the way. But also Keith David, William Shatner, Barry Bostwick, Martin Kleba, Richard Reichley, Jim O'Hara, and a bunch of names, sorry. It's going to be released in May 2016, and it's a horror comedy about these guys mowing down zombies. Sounds a bit familiar. Will you ask your military friends about it and maybe see when it comes out? I'd be happy to promote it. I just want to say two things about this issue before I go on. Because I really don't have too much to say about it because I haven't seen it, but I do have two comments to make. And one of them is about Ranger Up. I've got 4 or 5 T-shirts from Ranger Up, and I was very careful to make sure that the T-shirts I selected were not suggesting that I was a member of the military, because a lot of them are designed specifically for the military and for military veterans. But there's a number of them that I've got, including the shirt I wore during Speakeasy, which is it's a print. It's yellow on black of the classical. I think it's a Renaissance painting of Archangel Michael slaying Satan, and the graphic is "I shall fear no evil" in Latin. And I just wanted to say, for those of you who haven't been there, just go to Ranger Up, RANGERUP.com. I'm pretty sure it is. And I have to tell you, the graphic designer for Ranger Up is just the best I've ever seen. Their T-shirts are fantastic. Funny coincidence, because I was talking with our operations manager, Carla, and we're going to do a new line of clothes and T-shirts, but they're going to be much, much more striking. And I'm just basically going to point to the Ranger Up thing and say, hey, can we do something like this? This audience, those of you out there, if you go to rangerup.com, I'm telling you, you'll see a lot of things you really like. There's sheepdog stuff there, and classical stuff, and pro-American stuff, and it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I think it's non-Timibo Mala, Secret Squirrel. Thank you very much. I think that's what it is. I will fear no evil. And they're beautiful. They're just absolutely beautiful. I cannot recommend them highly enough. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about this question. And the second thing I wanted to say is I saw the previous veteran movie. It wasn't Call of Duty. What was it? It was the one with the SEALs. The great thing about the show is that I get the answer from the audience, and the bad thing about the show is it takes about 15 to 20, 30 seconds to get all the way out there and back again. Came out a couple of years ago about the SEAL team, and it was starring actual SEAL team members, and any second now it'll appear. 15 people will come up with the answer up there. And anyway, I saw that movie, and while I certainly loved the movie and I certainly loved the action, and one or two of the actors in there were really terrific, I thought that movie suffered quite a bit. Because of the fact that the actors were act of valor. Thank you very much. Arcturn wins, and I guarantee there'll be 15 other people get it exactly right. I thought the story was really good, and I thought the cinematography, all of the action sequences were fantastic. It was performed by actual SEALs. As a matter of fact, I think they got into trouble a little bit in terms of some of the things they revealed. And then there's this stuff of looking down on the submerged submarine. Spectacular. And the movie's really great, and it's really fun. It's got the ring of truth to it, but maybe I have an over-refined sense of this just because I've been in this business and a director and stuff for so long. But I felt that the movie suffered, especially in terms of the lead actor. I just thought it was... I just didn't think it was acted as well as it deserved. And that would be my concern about this movie. I think the reason that I'm able to do what I do to the degree I can do it, and I've had this conversation many times and sometimes with other people, is that by some fluke of fate, I was able to live in both these worlds. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I'm around pilots. engineers. I'm friends with Burt Rutan and things like that. That's kind of my life, right? I'm good friends with Burt Rutan and I'm good friends with John Voight. That's an odd combination. So I get to live in both those worlds, and it's unusual to find somebody who's been lucky enough to do that. And so when I watch something like Act of Valor, the leg warmer half of my brain, says, not quite believing this, not quite, and that's a shame, because the supersonic fighter pilot part of my brain says awesome. So we'll see. Now, they may just be better actors than the guys who were in Act of Valor, but as I say, I thought that movie suffered for that a little bit. So moving on, Ray Schneider says there seems to be some sort of Get Cruz movement that targets him not as a natural-born citizen for various alleged reasons, and attacking him on the basis of his religion, apparently a member of a denomination sect of extreme Baptist origin. One loony bin seemed to attack the fact that he was a Christian and all, with the usual nutcase about Timothy McVeigh being a Christian and Hitler being a Christian. The whole organized hate a candidate thing seems out of control. What would be the general approach to this kind of nastiness? I want to start with the Timothy McVeigh was not a Christian. Timothy McVeigh was an anarchist, an anti-government anarchist. He was an atheist. And put that aside, because I probably want to do 4 or 5 minutes on this. You will hear this occasionally from people saying that Adolf Hitler was a Christian. You just can't let those kind of statements go. You have to just leap on them. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler were very different people, but they had similar backgrounds. All three of them were lapsed Catholics, former Catholics. All three of them, specifically those three, had a deep, unending, unabiding hatred of Christianity, absolute loathing of it. And you don't have to be a super genius to figure this out. If the entire philosophy of Nazi Germany, the glue that held these bizarre, weird thoughts together, if all of that was simple anti-Semitism, then you are not going to expect that Adolf Hitler is going to get down and bow down before a Jew. Anytime anybody tells you that Adolf Hitler was a Christian, you just stop them right there and ask them that question. Really? Adolf Hitler got down on his knees every morning and prayed to a Jew? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Really? Adolf Hitler despised Christianity, not to the degree that Goebbels despised Christianity, and Himmler and Hitler and Goebbels had made an entire plan to eliminate the Christian church in Germany, but they all decided that it was going to have to happen after the war because they didn't think that they could afford that fight before they got out of the war. They knew there were a lot of Christians in Germany. They just said, we'll wait till we won the war and then we'll have that fight. Now, of all the three, Himmler was the one who basically went kind of nuts and started looking for this Aryan history. He went as far as Tibet, trying to find Aryans in Tibet. He was looking for a Germanic, Teutonic prehistory. And his opinion, Hitler thought he was a little batty, and so did Goebbels. But his opinion was that Christianity had destroyed European culture, utterly destroyed it with this Semite, Jewish, Middle Eastern superstition. And so Himmler went right back to the pagan roots. But Adolf Hitler had very little things in his life that he enjoyed, but the one thing he was obsessed with, absolutely obsessed with, this not only was something that Adolf Hitler enjoyed, it was something that made Adolf Hitler into Adolf Hitler, and that was Wagner's Ring trilogy. It's a 3-part opera with a fourth one, actually. There's sort of a prelude, and then 3 others, and I used to know these things. I want to say it's the Rhine Maiden, Siegfried, Das Valkyrie, and Götterdämmerung. I think that sounds right. So basically, Hitler, as a young man, before World War II, he's in Vienna, and he is in Vienna, and he sees the Ring operas, and this man is stone cold broke, and he spends all of his money going to the opera. He saw these things scores of times, 20, 30, 40 times each. Wagner and this sort of pre-Germanic history, this mythical German history, is what made Adolf Hitler into Adolf Hitler. This idea of the Germanic Superman and the especially the Götterdämmerung, the final one of them, the Twilight of the Gods. This idea that that Wotan and Valhalla and all of this kind of thing is the lost history that they had. It formed Adolf Hitler's worldview. It made up his Weltanschauung, I think is the word, and he absolutely despised Christianity. Goebbels despised Christianity, and so did Himmler, and they all were perfectly ready to destroy them, absolutely looking forward to destroying them. And their only problem was there were so many Germans that were either strongly Protestant in the southern part of Germany, I guess, or the other way around, in the northern part of Germany, and very serious Catholics down in the southern part of Munich, where the Nazi thing started. It's an absolute utter lie to say that Adolf Hitler was a Christian. He's nothing like a Christian. He was an anti-Christian. He didn't have a cross. The German cross was preceded Hitler by centuries, and it's absolutely ridiculous. You just can't let people do it. And if you don't have to remember all this stuff I just said, next time somebody tells you Adolf Hitler was a Christian, just say, really? Adolf Hitler got down on his knees and prayed to a Jew every day. That's what you're trying to tell me? That was his attitude about it. So it's nonsense, this idea that these Christians caused all these things. No, the great mass murders in history, really, when you get down to the top three, are Adolf Hitler with the 12 million that he killed, 6 million Jews, assorted homosexuals, gypsies, and the rest. Stalin, who killed 30, 40, 50 million of his own people, and Mao, who killed at least 50 million of his own people. What do these three people have in common? They're all socialists, and they're all atheists. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're an atheist, you commit mass murder, but it does seem to me that if you actually have a belief in God, that's going to inhibit your willingness to murder tens of millions of people. If you actually believe in God, how can you say that Hitler is a Christian? What possible interpretation of Christianity could possibly justify Nazism? It's absurd on its face. And these idiots just keep making it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. I'm not gonna put up with it. I'm just not. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So, there you go. That's all you need to know about it. As far as back to Ted Cruz goes, they have. Hey, Brent just showed up. Brent, I answered your question first. Sorry you missed it. The Cruz thing is, look, they fear Ted Cruz, and I think they fear Ted Cruz because, as I've said before, the Democrats have to put Republicans into one of three boxes. They either have to be old or stupid or evil, and preferably all three. And Ted isn't old and he isn't stupid, so he's got to be evil. And I've met Ted Cruz several times. I've spent a lot of time talking to Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is one of the nicest men I've ever met. I think Ted Cruz comes off a lot more harsh than he is in real life. In fact, when I first met him 2-3 years ago, I thought this guy could be president, but I don't think he's got the alpha quality. So I don't know. I'm sorry. There's something been distracting me, and I'm just going to go back and deal with it right now. I just want to get the name. I want to make double sure that I read this correctly, because this is actually worth answering to. It's about to wind me up. So let me just get this done. Yeah, that's it. We have somebody in our comments section called V. Calzoni. When I started to talk about Nazi Germany, he said that the Jews started the war with Germany. First of all, you can get the F out. You know what? You can get the fuck out of my comment stream right now. Okay, you can just leave. I don't know if you're a follower, and I don't know if you're a member, but if you are, you're getting your money refunded, and you're getting banned from my Facebook page. This kind of thing is not going to be tolerated on this show, in this vicinity, anywhere at all, period. Ever. Okay? Ever. Get the fuck out of my show. I don't want you here, and I don't want you anywhere near me. Let me tell you something, you miserable low-life swine, you miserable rotten piece of shit. Let me just tell you one thing, okay? I've studied the Nazi death camps in a fair amount of detail. Treblinka is about the size of a freeway rest stop. They killed about 1 million people there. They killed a smaller number in Belzec and a smaller number in Sobibor. But all of these places were tiny little places, and people came in there by the thousands, and they were executed. And I don't care if you like it or not, and I don't care if it upsets you or not, and I don't care if it offends you or not, okay? You can go straight to the devil, which is where you belong. Those people were murdered in cold blood. There's 100,000 tons of evidence, and if you want to come in here with a conspiracy theory about 9/11 or the moon landing, I'll talk about that. But you come into this room with this business about the Jews started this whole thing and that this whole thing was just a fraud and a fiction. I want to meet you in person. I want to meet you in person because I have a few words to say to you. I'm not going to let those people who are murdered in cold blood just lie on the ground and listen to somebody like you make these kind of absolutely asinine, ridiculous, disgusting comments. I would like to meet you in person so that I can punch you in your face. And that's what those people deserve, you know. That's what they deserve. That's what those innocent children, those little men and women, those little men and women and children who were put into those camps and who were taken off of these trains and lined up and shaved and had their gold teeth pulled out and then put into a gas chamber with a big Star of David over the top, walked down this little chute that they had at Treblinka, they had it at Belzec, they had it at Sobibor, and it was called the Stairway to Heaven, and every single one of those little children and women and men went down that abattoir chute, went into those buildings, got locked into gas chambers, were asphyxiated, and then they were simply murdered, taken out into a pit and buried. And if you think I'm going to sit here and let you get away with that kind of comment on my territory or my dime, you have another thing coming, you miserable, low-life bastard son of a bitch. If I ever run into you in person, ever, you and I are, one of us is going to the hospital. One of us is going to the hospital and the other one is going to jail. And if I can find a way to to ban you, if I can find out who you are, if I can get your actual, here's what I'd love to debate with you in person. We're not going to debate, Calzone, okay? We're not going to debate. If I see you in person, I'm going to knock your teeth down your throat. Understand? That's what people like you deserve. You don't deserve debate. You don't deserve debate. You don't deserve commentary. You don't deserve reaction. You don't deserve anything. You deserve to go to hell. You deserve to go to hell. That's what you deserve. Oh, you're also a 9/11 truther? Imagine my surprise. Imagine my surprise that the one thing that everybody saw right in front of their eyes didn't happen. What the hell is wrong with you, man? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What is broken with you? What part of your personality and your mental structure is so defective that you cannot face this truth? I don't know what it is. I don't know what's wrong with you, but you know what? I don't care. I think you belong in prison or a mental institution, frankly. I really will not hear it. Oh, their heads were shaved because of lice. Really? Really? Their heads were shaved because of lice? Really? Where did these ghettos go? Where did they go? Where did the Warsaw Ghetto go? Where did these ghettos go? I know where they went, and you know where they went, and everybody else knows where they went. Not here, not on my dime, not with me, okay? I know the history of how this stuff works. You're dealing with the wrong person here. I'm not a guy to go, oh, maybe the elephant's a little bit good. No. You want to hear this history? Here's how it started, okay? There was a little camp called Kelmo. Kelmo was in Poland. Kelmo was essentially just a building someplace. And at Kelmo, the Germans started to do something that they'd started a few years earlier with this euthanasia program. In Kelmo, they had a couple of vans and they backed them up into a building. You could see the exhaust pipes coming out of the vans and into the building. And in Kelmo, they started to kill people seriously by the thousands. But Kelmo, of course, is an existing structure, and Kelmo was just not really, very efficient. So they'd construct something called 3 death camps as a result of the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich, and they called it Operation Reinhard. And those 3 camps were Belzec, and then Sobibor, and then Treblinka. And in Treblinka alone, 900,000 people were executed, 6,000 a day. 6,000 a day. And you know why we know this? Because they're not here anymore. So where are they? Did Hitler send them to the Caribbean? Is that what he did? Did he put them on troop transports and send them to the Caribbean? Where did those people go, you miserable lowlife son of a bitch? Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? Where are all those people's moms and dads and family? Where are they? Where'd they go? Did Hitler send them to the moon? Did he fly them to a vacation package? Where are they? Where did they go? They all didn't have their life shaved off. I'll tell you something. The reason, by the way, that they shaved off their hair, you miserable lowlife son of a bitch, is not to clean off their lice. It's because they could sell the hair, like they could sell the teeth, and like they could sell all the stuff they stole out of their clothes. These people would go into these camps with coins or jewels sewed into their clothes, and they got all of those too. You miserable lowlife bastard. You miserable scumbag. You horrible piece of shit. You have the audacity to sit here in this day and age while people were... I will show you a picture of a gas chamber, and the walls are solid concrete. Solid concrete. In fact, I can find it right now. And there are nothing but scratch marks where people are trying to climb out of a gas chamber. I do not know what's wrong with you. I don't know what's wrong with you. I really don't know what's wrong with you. But I do know that you have a sickness and that you have a disease. You have a very bad disease. You have an infection of evil. You have evil in you. You have evil in you. And you have the kind of evil in you that was the same evil that caused all of this to happen in the first place. I can't believe you're allowed to live in this country in this day and age, honestly. I really can't. But I can tell you one thing. If there's a way for me to figure out how to ban you, I'm not going to stop the show and drop everything to ban you from the comment section. But I will tell you this. If there is a way to ban you, you're gone. And get back to my show and relax. Fuck you, man. You go back to hell and relax down there, okay? Go back to hell where you came from and relax down there. If you think I'm going to sit here and take this kind of crap from a measly, rotten, low-life, miserable, pampered, you have got another thing coming, dude. You got another thing coming if you think I'm going to relax after this. You miserable, cheap, rotten, vile, moral-free midget. You corrupted, evil, tiny, weak, pathetic, sad, sad little troll. Go back to where you came from, and I don't ever want to see you around here again, ever. And if you think I'm going to respond to you anymore, you're out of your mind. I'm done with you. I'm done with you. Explain the windows in the gas chambers. Why were they not broken out by the prisoners? So that's your answer, right? 6 million people disappear without a trace, and glass this thick isn't broken by aged people with their bare knuckles, therefore it didn't happen? Pathetic. Do you even realize just how pathetic your intellectual argument is? Forget about how evil it is. Forget about how evil it is. Don't you even realize how pathetic and weak you sound when you say, why didn't they break the glass that was the thickness of welder's glass with their bare knuckles? Really? Really? That's the reason? 6 million people disappear, 6 million Jews, another 6 million people disappear. All of these things exist. All the records, the Germans, are Germans. That's the thing about the Germans, unfortunately for the Germans, is that the Germans are Germans. They have a name for every single person, they have a name for every single number, and they have the train schedules, and they have the delivery dates and all that other stuff. You miserable, low-life son of a bitch. Get away from this office, get away from this, hover and click to boot. Is that all I have to do? Great. That's fantastic. I'll wait till he comes back. Oh yeah, there it is. Thanks. Yeah, come on, Calzone. Give me some more reasons it didn't happen. Is it because what? What's another reason that it didn't happen? The trains couldn't run fast enough, or maybe there wasn't enough military force, or maybe there wasn't a secret police to round them up, or maybe there's no evidence of the death camps, or maybe there's no signs of the gas chambers, because all this is true. You know it. You know it's true, you miserable low-life son of a bitch. I will not stand for it. I will not stand for it here. Come on back. Come on back. No, I like debating the troll. I'm not debating the troll, by the way. I'm not debating him. You may notice I'm not debating him. He came up with all these, like I said. The only reason I picked the glass thing was to show how pathetic and weak these people are. How weak. Mentally weak, evil, simple, stupid, bad, awful people. Accomplices to murder is what you are. You're an accomplice to murder. You are doing your level best to make sure that the murderers that committed the most horrible crime in history don't pay for it, and that the victims do. What a miserable, horrible, wretched, low individual you must be. I would really like to know more about you personally. I really would. I'd really like to know more about you personally. I'd like to know what happens to somebody, how something can go so wrong to create a creature like you. I'm actually very curious about this. I really am. I'd really like to know how something can go so wrong in a human being to create somebody like you. Now, looks he's being a little quiet up there. If I see him again, I'll ban him. So there you go. Sorry about the language, but there are times when language that needs to be used. So, there you go. He's gone. Yeah, imagine my surprise. Yeah, so this is probably the worst thing that's happened to Vinny for a while. You know, I'll tell you what, something there, jackass. If you think this was a little rough, just imagine what it's like to be sent down that chute, stark naked, freezing cold, with people screaming and your children clinging to you and wondering what's happening. And then figure out if this is a bad day that you're having, you miserable low-life son of a bitch. Yes, of course I try to attack Ted Cruz because he's a Christian. As I try to attack Ted Cruz because he's anything. I would like to make a comment about the natural-born citizen thing, however. Look, The traditional definition of natural-born citizen was overruled by the Supreme Court, but the original definition of a natural-born citizen was somebody who was born in the United States, within the confines of the United States, of two American parents. They made a special exception for people at the beginning of the country, because no one was an American when the country was founded. You can't very well have the requirement for president being you were a natural-born citizen with two American parents, because there weren't any American parents in 1776. But the idea was very simple, and the reason that they held the president and the president only to the standards of what was known as natural-born citizen was very simple. They didn't want any conflict whatsoever between America and the parent country. Now, I've done this as a thought experiment. I thought it was really fun. If you take Barack Obama, John McCain, Bill Whittle, and Jesse Jackson, which one of those four is a natural-born citizen? Well, it's not John McCain, because he wasn't born in the United States. He was born in a territory. It's not Barack Obama, because Barack Obama's father was not an American citizen. It's not Bill Whittle, because Bill Whittle was born in New York City with an American dad but a British mother, and so the only person who's eligible to be president is Jesse Jackson, according to the original constitutional definition of natural-born citizen. Now, without question, Barack Obama is not a natural-born citizen by that definition, but the courts ruled that he was. And so if they ruled that he was, then okay. If Barack Obama can be president, then Ted Cruz can be president. That's the way I look at it. The standard is either there or it's not. And once a standard is broken, it's broken. So there you go. I would like to think that the standard hadn't been broken, and that would have disqualified Ted Cruz, but it would have disqualified Barack Obama too. Hey, there we go. Hey, come back here, you. I'm sorry, excuse me, I just have to do this. I can't have cockroaches and vermin running around. There you go. See ya, you Nazi apologizing, murdering, sympathizing scumbag. Goodbye. I don't ever want to see you again, ever. If there's one thing that can make me crazier than 9/11 conspiracy, which is the same thing, by the way, covering up mass murder and blaming the victims, or at least simply getting the murderers off the hook. I won't stand for it. I'm not going to put up with it. Not here. Not in my show. Not ever. So Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz has to be destroyed. And so they're looking for anything they can to destroy Ted Cruz. They're going to go after the birth angle. It's not like, here's the one thing that's kind of interesting, isn't it? The second that this issue came up, Ted Cruz submitted his birth certificate, imagine. And his mother submitted her birth certificate, imagine. Ted Cruz is convinced he has the legal grounds to be president based on previous Supreme Court rulings. And Ted Cruz is the smartest man I've ever met personally. That's actually not true. I sat next to Scalia once. He told me he liked my speech, although he told me he couldn't say it publicly. Scalia is the smartest guy I ever sat next to or ever got to know in person. But Ted's second. And if Ted Cruz, with that kind of legal mind, believes he's got the constitutional grounds to run, that's good enough for me. I think if we'd held to the standard, he would be ineligible, but we didn't. Because if Ted Cruz is ineligible, then certainly Barack Obama is ineligible. But he's on his way out after 8 years, so I'm not going to... This is another thing that's kind of what we're talking about. Well, Bill, just, because they don't have standards doesn't mean we don't have to have standards either. I respectfully disagree. When the Marines were first fighting the Japanese, they treated them honorably, and when the Japanese had a little island out there off of Guadalcanal, after the Marines had taken Guadalcanal, there was a little island just off the main island, and there were about 90 Japanese on the island, and they were starving to death, and they were out there for weeks, and finally they waved a white flag, and something like 12 or 15 Marines went over in a little launch to accept their surrender, and they got out of the boat, and the Japanese were waving their white flag, and then they opened up with a machine gun, killed all 15 of them. Any of them that had a Marine Corps tattoo on their arms, they hacked those arms off with samurai swords, and then they stacked them there in a big pyramid. And after that, the Marines didn't take them quite the same way as they'd taken them before then, because the Japanese had earned it. They'd earned it, and these people have earned it too. I'm not going to play by rules that apply only to one side. Not going to do it. I'll play honorably in the beginning, but I'm not going to play by rules that just limit my side without having anything to do with them. That's not right. I'll start out honorably, and I'm happy to start out, fair. But I am not going to be the guy who says, "Well, we got to take our best players out of the game because of rules that Barack Obama broke." The presidency can no longer depend on the natural definition of a natural-born citizen, and that's that. Okay, now let's go. I think that covers most of it. Cheryl Tormey asks, thinking of moving back to Los Angeles area, but I'm hesitant because my politics have changed since the last time I lived there. Can a conservative make it in the land of make-believe? Yes, Cheryl, if you come back to Los Angeles and you want to be in show business, you can make it as a conservative in this business. You just cannot, under any circumstances, let anybody know about it. And Brent reminds me that it was 25 Marines and not 15. Thanks, Brent. I always like having people who know more about things than I do. You just can't let anybody know. Yeah. It's the most toxic environment ever. If you think, I mean, I really can't. There's no way to describe it. How toxic it is. There's no way to describe how unfair it is and how venal it is. There are stories of people I've heard firsthand. I've seen people crying in front of me in meetings and stuff, where people, like stunt people, tough guys, would cry and just tears running down their face, talking about all the times they had to look at their shoes and kind of nod when they were talking about Bush being a maniac and the soldiers being psychopaths and murderers and stuff. Right, Jim? And, okay, if you don't agree, you're never going to work again. There are stories. Any of these would get you absolutely sued in any other business, by the way, and we should be suing them in this business. I don't know why we're not, but those people want to work again too, I guess. There's stories of guys coming onto the set after some news or something with Bush, and, guy walks on a set, he's the producer, he says, "I want to fire somebody. Are there any Republicans here?" If somebody walked into an office building one day and said, "I want to fire somebody. Are there any Mexicans here?" the guy'd be in jail. He'd certainly be out of his job. And there you go. So it's teaching. Cheryl says teaching. Well, there goes that whole rant. Yeah, Cheryl, I mean, it's a very liberal town. Just be prepared to see Bernie stickers everywhere, and I'm ready for Hillary, and I'm ready for Hillary to go to jail. And with all this said, I've often said that I stay here because I have to, volcanologist has to live under the volcano, and that's all true. But the fact is, even despite the fact that the people are so awful, just mean and dumb, you cannot beat the climate. And a guy who grew up in Florida, surrounded by mosquitoes and 100% humidity and 95 degrees in the morning and 95 degrees at night, I just can't leave this place. I mean, when I fly over the mountains or I fly over the coast, down the coast, the video I showed earlier, I mean, you just can't find this anywhere. It's just so shockingly beautiful. I'd be in Texas otherwise, but I just, I don't know. I need to be here, and it's made a lot easier for me to be here by the fact that it's so unbelievably, shockingly beautiful and pleasant here, climate-wise. I suppose if they continue to make things worse, that will come a point where that tipping point gets reached, but it's not here yet. So anyway, yeah, you can definitely do it here. Just here's the way to think of it, Cheryl. I don't know if you're married or not. If you're married, then great. If you're not, prepare yourself for the dating scene and just try to imagine what it's like to be gay. Because if you come out as a conservative in Los Angeles and you want to meet somebody, you've got a 1 in 10 chance of meeting somebody who agrees with you. It's probably. I guess if you're gay, it's more like 1 in 4 or 4%, 5%, whatever. Most of the people you're interested in can't stand you. And they can tell you why they can't stand you, but they can't ever tell you what you actually believe, which is what they can't stand. So, there you go. But it's super expensive. The state is out of control. It's run by chimps. And it's filled with some awful people in show business. Filled with some great people. And by the way, I have to say this. This is not like platitudes. It's not the topic I'm talking about. I just want to add to it. I grew up in Miami, and a lot of Cubans in Miami, and I wasn't particularly fond of the Cubans as a group. As it turns out, most of the people in Latin America aren't very fond of the Cubans either. They find them to be a little arrogant and macho, and that was certainly my experience back in Florida. But since I got out here, I have to tell you, I don't think I've met people I like better than the Mexicans that I met out here. I think they're the most wonderful, kind, warm, hardworking people I've ever met. I don't think I've met a Mexican in California that I didn't like. And you want to talk about work ethic? I mean, seriously, these people work like animals, and they're great family people. I just can't tell you how much I like them. That doesn't mean that I'm in favor of them breaking the law. Most of the people who I meet in California are here legally, and you just couldn't ask for nicer people. Seriously, just absolutely wonderful. I am deeply fond of them. I found them to be the most outgoing, friendly, decent, like I said, family, respectful. I can't get enough of them. I think they're fantastic. They make great citizens, except for the murderers and the rapists and the people who are here to commit crimes. Okay, here we go. Ryan Castle says, a campaign at University of Wisconsin-Madison began a few years ago to ban the sale of single-use water bottles on campus. As it turns out, the organization sponsoring the campaign has the power to force every student to pay fees. Imagine. The Associated Students of Mordor is trying to take away our choice. As a freshman at the university who held my tongue for an entire semester, I'm ready to start mocking these weenies as I see them and taking down their pro-choice agenda. Any advice on how to convert those who can be saved and leave the orcs to soak in their collectivist filth? I took that question, Ryan, because I love the question. I love the way it's phrased, and I'm always happy to help young people. Here's the thing, Ryan. I say it all the time. We got a question about this coming up, which is great. Every time you look at a progressive do something appalling, I heard there's a new expression out, which is actually a great expression. I don't particularly tend to like these kind of great expressions, but nevertheless, this is a very descriptive one, and it's called virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is when you do something to show off how good you are. And basically, virtue signaling is a new expression for everything I've been talking about for 10 years now. The left has to have this unearned moral superiority. They have to be seen to be better than you. So basically what's happening is they're trying to ban single-use plastic bottles on your campus to show you and everyone else how much they care about the environment and how much better person they are because they care about the environment than you who just happens to drink a water, and just wanted to have a drink. So, as I always say, if you're going to go after these people, go after their unearned moral superiority. You're not going to win the battle by pointing out that single bottles are recyclable or anything. The way you win on this particular argument, I think, Ryan, is find out how much money they made. Find out how much money they made. If you're what you're saying here is that they're using students to pay fees, they're forcing them to pay fees. Then find out how much money they made, or make an estimate, and then go out and protest. Just say the people who are sponsoring this bill are filthy one percenters. They're in it for the money. If they weren't in it for the money, they wouldn't take the money, but they are taking the money. Make it about the money, because this is where they live, right? You're hitting them where they live. They hate capitalism. They hate the rich. They hate the one percenters. Accuse them of being one. Accuse them of stealing money from citizens who simply want to have the choice of recycling a bottle, not recycling a bottle, or whatever. They want to take away your choice by force in order to get power and money. And when you accuse them of wanting power and money, then you basically make them into what they claim to hate. And then they do that. You're probably too young. You're certainly too young for this. There was an episode of Star Trek. Was it Mudd's Women? I think so. Where all these androids had little name tags and numbers. They were different, versions of the same set of copies. And these androids were capable of answering simple questions, but whenever they got into a tough question, they had to go back to the lead android, whose name was Norman. And so needless to say, the way that Spock and Kirk got out of this thing was by setting up logic traps that they couldn't get out of, and then they just go, Norman, coordinate, Norman, coordinate. And Norman couldn't coordinate, and their heads literally explode, smoke start coming out of their ears. And that's what you have to do to these people, Ryan. You have to accuse them of taking the money and using the power to deny people the choice because of their own personal greed and their own personal will to tell other people what to do. Make them into the bad guys. See what happens. Let me know. I get the feeling it'll be a productive line of attack. Keep me posted. Scott Tomaski says, Bill, you spent countless hours on TSL talking about the progressives and their unearned moral superiority. Does the opposite exist? I mean, is there such a thing as earned moral superiority? If so, who has it and how is it gained? Yes, there is such a thing as earned moral superiority. And the term I would use for earned moral superiority, it's I mud, not mun's women. Thank you, Dan Ramsey. I hate being out-trekked in my own Trek background. I got a freaking Gorn captain, here, and I've got, Mud's... I mud. It was worth a try. Yes, there is such a thing as earned moral superiority, and it normally just comes from either virtue or experience. I don't know the details about Mother Superior. If somebody were to tell me there's a dark side to this story, I'll believe you. But if there is, I haven't heard it. Mother Teresa has moral superiority. Mother Teresa can talk about sacrificing to help the poor because she has a life of sacrificing to help the poor, and she doesn't parachute in from Beverly Hills to help the poor for a weekend with the cameras rolling and then hand the stuff off to her publicist. Mother Superior made a decision to live what she said. And frankly, and there's the word I was looking for, you beat me to it, Lord TL, because this is basically what I was kind of teeing up for. In our society, I think one of the few people that have actual moral superiority have the ability to make a statement that says, I know something that you don't know, and I'm in a position to comment on this in a way that you're not. And I would give that that nod to veterans. I have an opinion about Iraq. I have an opinion about the use of force. And to be crystal clear about this, my opinion about Iraq is not my opinion about Iraq in contravention to what veterans say. My opinion about Iraq, for example, or Afghanistan or any of the other conflicts is predicated on what I'm hearing from the veterans who, in fact, have the moral superiority to talk about this. And why do they have moral superiority when Code Pink doesn't have moral superiority? Because the guys who are men and women who are signing up on the dotted line are risking their lives. They're actually risking their lives to defend this country. They're not just talking about it. I'm just talking about it. And so, yeah. Now, there's an important thing I want to say here. And this is, I'm glad you asked the question because some of this is not, maybe not clear even to me. And that's why I love doing the show so much because I learned so much from you guys. When I say that their weapon is unearned moral superiority, I don't mean to say that they're not capable of, I'm not saying that they're not allowed to make an argument. That's not what I'm saying at all. I have an opinion about the military, and my opinion is as valid as anybody else's opinion is about the military. I'm not saying they don't have a right to speak about war if they're not in the military. What I am saying is, when you come to progressives, that's all there is. That's all there is. They don't have an argument, so they have a posture. And that's why the posture is so annoying to me. It's why it's so disgusting to me. On some level, if we're talking about the fall of civilization, I've got the earned moral superiority because I've done nothing but study this. It's all I do. But that doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make me immune from argument. I might be completely wrong about these things. We're kidding, of course I'm not. But I might be. So this is kind of what I'm getting at. You can look at for example, if somebody says that we need to get off of the power grid and that carbon dioxide is killing the planet, and they say this as they come to work in their Prius, and they've got a Save the Planet bumper sticker because their Prius gets 35 miles to the gallon and my Camaro gets 17. But if they drive 30, 40 miles every day and I only drive a mile every day to my studio, then they're actually putting out more greenhouse gas than I am. They don't have the moral authority over me that they claim to have. First of all, they're wrong about the carbon dioxide anyway, but they don't have the moral authority. That's all they've got. So what they want to do is they want to use the moral authority as the entire basis of their argument. So you have to knock that out of the way. Veterans have a morally superior stance to talk about war and conflict, especially combat veterans, have a morally superior position to talk about these things because they can genuinely say, I've been there, I've seen it, and you haven't. Okay. Shuts me up. I can have an opinion about what's going on the ground in Iraq, and if 50 guys come back and say, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but having been on the ground in Iraq, you're wrong, That trumps my argument as far as I'm concerned. But I don't want to be mistaken to say that you don't get to make an argument unless you have this moral superiority. Very few people actually have moral superiority. I was talking about the grid. Somebody's driving a Prius and so on. They talk about, oh, we got to save the planet and we got to cut our electrical, and we got to cut coal, we got to cut oil, we got to go to windmills. And then he goes home and turns on his widescreen TV and plays video games and sits down at Starbucks and gets out his Apple computer and writes posts about how evil corporations are. That's just plain hypocrisy. That's saying one thing and doing something else, and acting like you're superior when in point of fact you're not. Now, if a person, on the other hand, were living out in the wild in a tent with no electricity, making fire for fuel and cooking whatever they could find, then that person talking about getting off of the grid, I'd still be able to argue with that person. I still think they're wrong, but they at least have the authority that comes with living up to your beliefs. You're not a hypocrite. You say you're going to do something, you say you believe something, and then that's what you do. So to that degree, I think I certainly respect people like that. Which is why on some level, while I think ISIS needs to be scattered all over the Middle East, and when I say I don't mean the organization, I mean every single one of them needs to be scattered all over the Middle East. I think they're the worst people on earth, and they may be among the worst people that ever lived. I know I can be clear about this. I respect ISIS. I don't admire them. In fact, I want every single one of them blown into atoms, and I don't want every single Berkeley professor blown into atoms. Are we crystal clear on what I'm saying here? I would like to see every member of ISIS exploded out over the desert, and I don't want to see any American citizens exploded out over the desert, but on some level, I respect ISIS for believing what they believe in and be willing to fight and die for it, rather than a Berkeley professor who is protected by the sacrifice of men and women that they despise, living a life of luxury and ease, and doing everything they can to make sure that that life of luxury and ease is upended by these murderers out in the desert. They are worse. Well, they're not worse people. I have to be careful about that. But they are certainly not morally superior to those people. I think most warriors would probably tell you, this is my experience from reading and lots of histories and talking to a lot of these guys, that more often than not, soldiers in conflict will respect the soldiers that they're facing in the field much more than they respect the people back home who are trying to lose the war for them, or for the politicians that may have put them in a bad situation, or whatever the case. So yes, and as Brian Yoder points out, I'm not saying you have an automatic win by arguing from authority. You don't get to say, well, I'm in the military, so therefore I'm right. You don't get to say that. You do get to say, well, I've been there, and this is what I saw. But you don't get to say, well, I'm in the military, you don't know anything about it, and so on. I can talk about education in America without being a teacher. And I can talk about military strategy and military intervention and moral case of right and wrong without being in the military. But I can't claim that I'm better than you are because I drive a car that gets more mileage than you, or I have a ribbon on my lapel or anything like that. That's really what I'm talking about. So to be honest with you, Scott, I don't really feel like anybody really has moral superiority. You asked, does it opposite exist? I think there's experience and there's authenticity is maybe a better word. But I don't know if anybody really has moral superiority over anybody. And if they do, that's not enough. You have to win the argument. You have to win the argument. You have to make sense. You have to make a better case. And hopefully, the people who make the best cases are the people who have had the most experience. If the topic were how to seduce 19-year-old college students by impressing them with how deep you are and how incredibly selfless you are and how you see things that no one ever else saw before, including why the enemy is right and why we're wrong, then you probably got the moral authority to speak on that subject and not be shot down for being a hypocrite. That's something you can talk about if you're a Berkeley professor of whatever. Or if you want to be a women's study professor and you want to talk about the harm done by an absent or an abusive father and the consequences downstream in terms of your hatred for men, then you can talk from a position of authority and experience, and I'd be willing to listen to you from that point of view. But When you start telling me you're better than you are because you believe in things, you have a bumper sticker on your car, is not going to get away with it from me. Not for me. You're going to have to make a case. There are some people in this world I respect. I respect soldiers enormously. I respect the huge majority of policemen. I respect first responders, firemen, all those other people. And I respect the quiet people that don't get any credit at all. I respect the guy that's up there somewhere right now, somewhere within several miles of where I am, or certainly within a couple hundred miles of where I am. Somebody somewhere right this second is sitting there watching a generator. They're in the control room. They're looking at dials and gauges. It's the night shift. It's dark outside. They're going to be there till midnight. And somebody somewhere is making sure that the power's on. And that person never, ever gets any credit. They never get any recognition. Nobody knows their names and nobody knows who they are. Somebody's keeping the water running. Somebody's making sure that all this stuff is happening. And if you want to talk about the people I actually have the most respect for, those guys come high, but the guys who come highest for me, truthfully now, honestly, are the people that do the cleaning up. I mentioned before the guy who works here as a janitor. He runs the parking concession by day. He's here at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, runs the parking concession by day, closes it down at 6, and then he comes here and cleans the building until midnight. He does 2 jobs, and he works like a slave, and I have more admiration for this man than I have for just about any politician, just about any professor. The people that clean things up, the people that are sewer workers, the people that are dealing with waste management, that's not something I want to do, and they do it, and I'm very grateful for it, and I try to remember them as often as I can. All right, moving on here. This is a great question. Are you doing on time? We're good. Matthew Lloyd says, is the Oregon standoff an indication or precursor that we're very close to needing an American Revolution 2.0? If the election doesn't go our way, does that effectively mean we're past the point of return and it's time to suit up? None of us want that, and it seems like we keep moving the line in the sand or don't have a clear idea of where that line is to begin with. Are frogs being slow-boiled, uncomfortable, but not too uncomfortable to join out? Well, yes, certainly frogs are being slow-boiled. There's no question about that. It's a great question, Matthew. I think the Oregon standoff is just another indication. It's one of many weather reports that are coming in from weather stations all around the world that things are changing and that the temperature is getting a little bit out of control, if you'll pardon the expression. It is an indication that people are, the huge numbers of people, the enormous majority of people have lost faith in the government. And so the outliers, the people on one end of the bell curve and people on the other end of the bell curve, everybody's moving in the same direction, even though there's an enormously wide disparity. I think on the Stefan show, the last one I did that I haven't posted yet, I talk a bit like, somebody said I sound like Mike Rowe. I'm proud to know Mike Rowe. I was in a room with Mike Rowe, and Mike Rowe said, did anybody see that video that guy did about, I forget what it was, maybe it was the atom bombs or something. And everybody looked at him and he said, what? And he said, that guy right there. And he looked at me and said, oh my God, he's a terrific guy. Mike Rowe is everything you think Mike Rowe really is, he really is. And yes, Mike Rowe deserves a medal for dirty jobs and dangerous catch and stuff, but I digress. I just wanted to show off. So yes, when you get something like the Oregon standoff on one end of the bell curve, which is the extreme anti-government end of the bell curve, what does the other end of the bell curve look like? Well, I asked that question on Stefan's show, and I think I said, look, is there anybody out there right now who can honestly say at night, I know a lot of people say it in public, is there anybody at night in the darkness of their room before they go to sleep who can say, boy, this Barack Obama exceeded my wildest dreams when he first came on the scene in 2008? Is there a living single person who can say that? In other words, if his greatest supporters, the disappointment you hear from his greatest supporters is everywhere, and that's just the spoken disappointment. Is there one person who said, oh, he was much better than I thought he would have been back when he first got elected and he was going to be the light worker and stop the rise of oceans and, Peace Prize? I don't think there's one person. So on the far left pro-Obama, pro-government side of the thing, everybody's moving away from this state position, big state position. And on the other end, you've got guys now who are feeling that it's time to party down. It's time to throw down. I don't agree with them. Not yet. let me just talk about this Oregon thing for a second, because I need to be clear about this. And I wrote the name down and I've forgotten it. I mentioned it on, where did I mention it? Did I mention it last week? Did I talk about Oregon last week? I don't think I did. No, I think I did it prior to the, because I thought we were going to talk about Oregon with Stefan, and I wrote the name down. I don't have the name. Somebody gave me the name. You know what? Here it is, I think. Hang on a sec. I want to get this right. She certainly deserves that I get it right. There it is. So I had an opinion about the Oregon thing, and my opinion was, look, the provocation is great. The federal government, I think, is completely out of control. I think the prosecution of these guys and sending them back to jail and all that other stuff, I think it's all terrific, and worthy of protest and rebellion. And even though some people are saying these aren't the greatest guys in the world, some of these Oregon guys, my feeling was, hey, you know, a protest is a protest, and a protest is certainly called for. But at the same time, I kind of said it's against the law, and I'm still a law and order guy. And my position was, you know, we obey the law until there is no law, and then it's time to overthrow the government and get new laws. But this is not at that point yet. It's getting closer, but it's not at that point yet. I want to be about as clear about that as I possibly can be. We're not at that point yet. And so I think this takeover is illegal, and therefore I'm against it. And then I saw a video on this. It had about 150,000 views at the time. I suspect it's well above 200,000 now. And I had to write the name down because I've never heard of her before. But she's a constitutional attorney who went to the University of Florida, so her intellect and her credentials are unimpeachable. I guess I did mention it. I'm going to bring it up again. Her name is Chris Ann Hall. And just to answer your question, Matt, Chris Ann Hall read the Constitution, and she talked about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 13, where basically it says that the federal government shall be entitled to 10 square miles of territory for D.C., assuming that that they can cede the land from the states, and they also have enough. They have a right to get forts and ports, you know, forts, armories, and port facilities. So I did talk about it last week, so I'm not going to go into detail now. But basically, the entire argument is the Bureau of Land Management is not only illegal, is not only uncalled for in the way that the EPA and Department of Transportation are uncalled for by the Constitution. The Bureau of Land Management is actually illegal because the Constitution specifically says that the federal government can't own more land than the 10 square miles of D.C. and enough land for forts and ports. It's not a third of the country. So by that standard, these ranchers are arguing with an illegal entity, and they're 100% correct. It's an illegal entity, the Bureau of Land Management. The fact that that's federal land is not only not provided for in the Constitution, it's against the Constitution. And once I got to that point, I realized, yeah, they're right. They're right. And if there's one thing out there that terrifies the progressive left, it's citizens with rifles talking about freedom. That's why they want gun control. They talk about it for the mass murders. They don't worry about that. They want the idea that somebody could supplant the state is terrifying to progressives. It's their primal fear, as I said before. That's the fear that the slave owners have, is that there's going to be a slave uprising in at nighttime. So there you go. Let's see what we got next. Chris Taylor asks if by some national confusion over your virtual presidency you actually became commander-in-chief, and also that to ensure torture would not be abused, the Congress had passed a law saying the president could order enhanced interrogation techniques to be used on a captive only if the president personally volunteered to undergo the same technique for the same duration. And there's a little bit after that, but that's the gist of the point. I'm so glad you asked that question. When waterboarding became an issue back, I want to say around 2003 or 4, maybe just before the Iraq thing, but when they were waterboarding, I believe, this is my understanding, that there were only 3 people that were waterboarded. One of them was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Now, is waterboarding torture? I would not call it torture. And the reason I wouldn't call it torture is because I'd be willing to undergo waterboarding, while I wouldn't be willing to undergo torture. If you want to cut my fingers off with a bolt cutter, no. You want to bash my teeth in with a rifle butt, no. You want to hang me by my wrists for 6 hours, just hanging so my shoulders come out of their joints? No. That's all torture, and I wouldn't be willing to undergo that. But our Special Forces guys are waterboarded, and this is the point I was trying to make, and I was talked out of it, probably wisely, although I don't know if I believe it was wisely or not. So here's the answer. I would agree with that policy. And I want to be crystal clear about this because it's so easy to make fun of, keyboard warriors. I would be willing to be waterboarded to make the point. I'd be willing to be waterboarded repeatedly to make the point because I have a pretty strong will when I put my mind to things. I want to be crystal clear about this. I am not for a second, suggesting that I could withstand the waterboarding. I'm not for a second suggesting it wouldn't be awful. I'm not for a second suggesting that I wouldn't want to panic. It's not for a second suggesting that it's pleasant or that it wouldn't be able to get any information that it wants out of me. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. In fact, I'm probably more susceptible to waterboarding than most people because I have a kind of a sensitive gag reaction when they put those molds in your teeth to take an impression of your teeth, which I had a bunch of done not too long ago, a couple years ago. That when some of that goop starts going back in the back of your throat, I kind of panic almost, like really. So I would say I'm particularly susceptible to the panic terror aspect of that. But I'm also good in emergencies, and I have the ability to have my willpower overwhelm my emotions. So just so we're crystal clear, I would, if it were coming down to making the point to save the country, yes. Look, I want to be, let's just back up a step. I am not talking about waterboarding people to find out whether or not they're guilty. Because if you do that, there's a chance you could be waterboarding an innocent person. I'm not talking about, well, we should waterboard them to see if they're guilty. No. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed murdered 3,000 people. If he'd murdered 3 people or 1 person, he'd deserve the electric chair or a firing squad or the scaffold. So I don't care about at all. He's a mass murderer. He deserves to die. And I think it's the same can be said for the other people that were waterboarded. But let me get back to the specific question. So yes, under controlled circumstances with a doctor there in case I have a heart attack and all the rest of it, I would be willing to be waterboarded, fully understanding that this would be the most unpleasant experience of my life. Apparently, when they do it on friendlies, you hold a weight or something, and when you drop the weight, they stop. Look, this is really what I'm trying to say. Yes, and I know, and somebody said it's in your nose and not your mouth. I understand that, but I just wanted to suggest that I have a sensitivity towards my respiration. Let's put it that way. So let me be crystal clear. This is what I believe I would be able to do. I would be in position. They would start the waterboarding. I would go ahead and drop all this stuff, and I would sit bolt upright, and I would say that's the worst thing that ever happened to me, and then I would say, do it again. Because I can endure that kind of thing. I actually can. I wouldn't say I could do it for hours. I wouldn't say I could do it for days. I'm just saying I could do it 3 times, 4 times. And I wouldn't be willing to do that if somebody was talking about, we're going to knock your teeth in with a rifle butt, or we're going to cut your fingers off with a bolt cutter. I wouldn't be willing to say, yeah, cut another one, yeah, do it. No. So I don't think it's torture. And while I think this idea that the president have to be willing to undergo it is a bit extreme, I do think you can end the argument by saying, if we do this to our special forces guys to warn them and to, on some level, if not acclimate them, then at least let them know what to expect in the case that they are captured, then my point is, if this is something we do to our very best soldiers and they sign up for it willingly, then it's not, in my mind, torture. And there's your answer. So while I don't think necessarily that the president has to undergo it, I think if our soldiers, our special forces soldiers, are volunteering to undergo it, and that the people who are training them think it's a necessary part of their training, I think that's all the answer I really need, frankly. So hopefully that answered it for you. I got a few to go, 2 to go. Yeah, I'm feeling the burn today. So Chris Taylor has a big old, oh no, that was the last one. We got 1 to go. Hey, hooray. And finally we have one from Elisa Lee Gossage, who says there are a lot of women and some men who are clamoring for strong female fictional characters to relate to. But if one identifies as a strong female, then why do they need the affirmation of a make-believe person? I've never understood this. And quite frankly, as a strong woman myself, it pisses me off when these soft-minded feminists screech all day long for this. I like or hate a character based on who they are, not based on their genitalia. Can you explain why these women and men think this way? Part of it, Elisa, is what we talked about earlier. It's the moral superiority. And frankly, look, I've said this 100 times. I just have to say it again. Anybody who doesn't believe that women deserve to be paid the same rate for the same work is a savage, a barbarian. I don't want people like that in my society. Anybody who says that occupations are off limit to women, presuming that they can make the same standards as men, is also not welcome around me. I don't consider that feminism. I just consider that decency and humanity and common sense. And by the way, this idea, women get paid 72 cents on the dollar for men, I know this has been debunked 1,000 times. Men make more money than women do because they work more dangerous jobs and they put in longer hours. And the point I'm trying to make about the 72-cent thing is, I'll come back to the other part of it is, does anybody actually believe it's like, I'm applying as a manager here at the Walmart. Can you tell me what it pays? Well, it pays $35,000 starting if you're a man, but you, sweetheart, sugar cheeks, we're going to pay you $27,000. Done. They're in jail. It's over. Of course that doesn't happen. So the question is this heroism thing. Look, I've never been anything other than honest on this show. I didn't know if women would make good pilots or not. And then I got to be friends with a woman who's a helicopter pilot. She's flying Black Hawk helicopters defending her country. She's a terrific pilot, and I've known some other women who are great pilots and terrific pilots. There aren't as many of them as men, obviously, but they are making the same standards as men, and there are women out there flying Apaches right now and A-10s, killing the bad guys, risking their lives. And while it took me a little while to come along, and this happened, 20 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, like I said, I'm usually right because I move. I was thinking I didn't think they could do it, but turns out in those capacities, I was wrong. So I changed my mind. Now, with that said, there was apparently a case where a couple years ago, 2 women were rushed into, I won't say rushed, were allowed into naval carrier operation as fighter pilots, and both of these women were subpar, significantly subpar. They would have been washed out if they were men. And my understanding is dim, but my understanding is, hey, I'm sorry, Harry, I'm sorry if it's so disappointing and depressing for you. If you find it really disappointing and depressing, perhaps you ought to hang up. This is a show where I take questions from people. I don't invent the questions, and it's not my topic. So I've seen 3 comments about how depressing this is, and honestly, if you're really that depressed, might be a good time for you to just maybe turn off the internet. In cases where you're trying to force the issue, then you have problems. And I think one of these women went into the fan deck on the back of a carrier. So back to the kind of the hero thing. Look, Ronda Rousey can kick my butt 20 ways to Sunday. She's tough. She's unusual and she's rare, but she's tough. So if that's what you're looking for in a hero, it's modified my opinion a little bit about the Scarlett Johansson thing, but I think she certainly kicked my ass, and so I think what we're really trying to say is this. I'm trying to read this question again. I think the first really strong female character that I can remember was Ripley in Aliens. That was 1985, I want to say 87, somewhere in there. And Ripley in Aliens didn't violate any standards of reason or believability. She was a navigator on a spaceship. She wasn't a soldier or a warrior, but she had skin in the game. She was inventive in the first movie. She was clever and she was brave. And she had to be brave or she's going to die. And in the second movie, she goes back into the den of these aliens, not because the other men are cowards, but because the other men are incapacitated. I think in that movie, when she straps on the gun and the flamethrower and goes in there, she's going in there to save that girl, and it's kind of the mother instinct, and I just don't think it could have been done any better. She goes down there and she kicks this alien's butt because she uses skills that she has. She knows how to run a power loader, and she's got the guts and the courage to go down and do that. There's no question that women have that kind of courage. Some women do. And so I thought that Ripley in Aliens was a terrific female character. Terrific. Just absolutely terrific. and very believable in a way that some of these aren't. Some of these things you see these rail thin models, and they're knocking the daylights out of flying jump kicks out of these huge guys. I don't believe it. I never saw Ripley beat up Marines. I saw Ripley take a flamethrower and some grenades and a machine gun down and shoot up an alien, but I never saw her do something that beggared belief. I never saw her beat up 5 of these Marines with flying dropkicks. And I guess that's kind of where I try to draw the line on this business about female heroes and female action heroes and all the rest. The subject of women in combat is a very touchy one. I kind of want to come down on the conservative side of this to say that that I don't want to experiment and socially engineer combat units in order to make a domestic point and to please a domestic voting bloc, and in the process, kill people. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that risk. I'm going to have to be proven that's the case. I mean, these 2 women who passed Ranger School, they said no, they did pass just like everybody else, and some people have said no, we were there, and they didn't. So, when it comes to being combat warrior, you not only have to clear the bar of can they physically do what the men have to do, all of it, carry a 200-pound guy in his pack out of action, but you got a deeper trouble here, and that trouble would be, does the presence of a woman or a few women in the squad alter the behavior of the men? And if so, that's a problem. Is it something that can be overcome? Can fighting men be trained or conditioned to treat women the exact same way as men fighting in a unit? I suppose it might be possible, but I don't want to put male soldiers at risk. There's this constant talk about men would go to extreme risk to protect women, and needless to say, if women are captured, there are things that can happen to women that are not going to happen to men, and so that genetic kind of warrior kicks in. I don't want to mess with what Lord Teo just put up there, which is the greatest military in the history of the world, the greatest fighting forces, the best soldiers that we've ever produced, and they work in like clockwork. And all I see is social engineering on this one. I just think we need to, if this is something that can be changed, it's going to take a little more work than we've got right now, and I don't want to experiment in the field. I wouldn't mind experimenting in the field where people don't get killed. I'd like to experiment in the field where we can get some data on this, but the last thing I want to do is force women into combat units and have it end up killing guys who wouldn't have to die otherwise, because that's inexcusable in my opinion. That's not something that I'm ready to experiment with as Commander-in-Chief. So I know I've kind of danced around that issue there, Lisa, in terms of your question. I think, as I said, when you get down to Ripley, you're dealing with, if you're looking for an action hero, look, I know this sounds blithe, and I know the word heroic is bandied around an awful lot and used in ways that degrade the term. But when I think about what especially a single working class mom has to go through, when I think about what a mother has to do in terms of getting up early, getting the kids dressed and fed, and then on their way to school, and then go to some job on the bus, and then work all day, and then come back from the homeschool. I mean, I just had my nephew out here for 4 days, and it's astonishing how much attention just one child takes. You may not want to call that heroism in the degree that walking into gunfire is real heroism, but you think you can say that that there is a very heroic, self-sacrificing, noble, and admirable quality to people who stick it out and do the right thing and the tough thing because it's the right thing. So I think that's it. Now, somebody in the comment section, I see that Phasma is being mentioned in the comment section, so prepare yourself for a Star Wars spoiler here, a little one anyway. in Star Wars, in the trailer, you can leave for a minute here or so because, again, this is a little spoiler. It's not a real big one. But there's an awful lot about that. Maybe we'll do a Force Awakens episode or something. They have set up in the trailer, and when all we had was just a simple little glimpses of things in that, those first trailers. It's like, what does this mean? What does that mean? So you've got these new stormtroopers, and then there's one stormtrooper in chrome with a cape, super badass stormtrooper. I thought it was a guy. Then we find out later it's a woman. Okay, why not? She's in armor, she's got a gun. I don't see any problem with this. Great. And she's made out to be super badass. She's the badass, elite, #1 Guardian stormtrooper. And just through raw laziness or poor planning, there's an awful lot of lazy writing in that movie. Something has to happen at the end of the movie. Something critical has to happen, and she stumbles upon the scene, and somebody puts a gun to her head and says, "Do this thing, which will essentially cause your side to lose." And this super gigantic, awesome, amazing, tough as nails, killer, elite stormtrooper just says something like, "You'll regret this," and then does it? What does that say? What's that say? It's like, Kirk, we want you to open fire on Federation headquarters. And I've got a phaser to your head, Captain Kirk. So you open fire on Federation headquarters with your phasers and photon torpedoes, or else I'm going to blow your head off. And Kirk says, "You'll regret this." Starfleet headquarters is destroyed. What the hell does that make Captain Kirk? What does it make him? It makes him a wimp and a traitor and just a wuss. It makes him a laughing stock, and it's just laziness. It's bad, lazy, cheap, stupid writing. It's easy writing. Oh, we need somebody. Let's use this villain. Well, not a villain anymore. She's not a villain anymore. She's not somebody to be afraid of anymore. She's a person who will do whatever is asked of her the second her life is in danger. It's not a villain. That's not somebody to fear. They could have found any guy in a white stormtrooper outfit to do that, but they decided to bring her into it, and it's just appalling. It's just really bad writing. And Eisenfire says she's coming back. I have no doubt that she'll come back, but she's not going to come back to me. I'm not going to respect this person. She just surrendered instantly, just surrendered. And it was, that's as small of spoilers you're going to get. It's not a big deal, actually. But it's like, please, if somebody's going to buckle, give it to somebody else. If, on the other hand, you want to make this person a real badass for the future movies, then have her say, then shoot me. It's not so hard. They're not going to shoot her. They're the good guys. Just have her say, no, I'm not going to do it. Shoot me. Shoot me right now. Here's my gun. Blow my head off. I will die before I join you rebel scum. Now you got somebody who can be a factor in future movies, but it's lazy and it's easy, and it's a lot of laziness and easiness in that movie. It's really kind of a shame, actually. We really should do a Force Awakens movie because there's a lot of stuff in there. It's just the way it is, So hopefully that answered it for you, Elisa. It's a tough issue. I should add one more thing here. I have a trainer who I've been working with for several months now, and I came in once and I said, "You know what you are? You're a pocket battleship," and she's just so tickled by that term. A pocket battleship was a term used for a set of German cruisers. You think I'd know this? Graf Spee, I want to say, it was one of them. Anyway, just before, after the Treaty of Versailles, the Germans were limited to battleship tonnage. They could only build ships that were so big. And so the Germans built these cruisers, but they were as heavily armored, or darn near as heavily armored as a battleship. And they had guns almost as big as a battleship, and they were very fast. And they were called pocket battleships, little battleships. And I walked in one day and I called her a pocket battleship. She's probably 25 years old, and she's wee TIE fighter and trains, and she's built out of titanium. I mean, she is the most perfect physical specimen I've ever seen. She's built out of solid titanium. I kicked my ass 5 ways to Sunday. And she's very into the girl power thing, but she's not into the feminism thing. And it's a refreshing kind of thing. She's a fighter. I mean, she trains to fight, and man, is she in terrific shape. And see, this is the difference, I think, between the feminism and the girl power thing. She's a fighter. I wouldn't want to get in the ring with her. She's deadly. And she takes it very seriously. She trains very hard. She's in the gym working out 5 hours a day and getting my sorry butt into shape quite well, I might add. And yet, so I respect her, and she's got the heart of a warrior. There's really no other way to put it. I mean, I talked to her about a number of things. She's a warrior, and she has been for a long time. She did it all by herself. She didn't get any help or support. But she's not a man-hater. She's not a feminist in the sense that, the patriarchy or, no, she's none of that. She's just a tough, kick-ass girl. She's a tough, kick-ass girl. And I just adore her. I think she's one of the best people I've ever met. She's so kind and friendly, and she's very motivating and very supportive on and off duty. And I just think the world of her. And she's changed my mind a little bit too about the physical combat side of it. I mean, she's really tough. I don't think she could carry a 200-pound guy and his pack out of combat, but I don't think she claims to be able to do that. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she is. But in any event, I wouldn't want to mess with her. She kicked my butt. She is strong, really strong, and built like a battleship, a particularly well-shaped battleship. So she's changed my mind a little bit and has shifted me a little bit more away from the, Scarlett Johansson can't take down these guys. I still don't think she could take down fighters. I certainly don't think she could take down 3 or 4 men. And I don't think she would claim that she could do it either. But the point is, she's into the girl power. She's a warrior, and she's not filled with hatred towards men, and she's not filled with this kind of, women need men like a fish need a bicycle kind of thing. So you can have it both ways, I think. I really do think you can have it both ways. You can have the girl power without having the man hatred. And she's evidence of it. So anyway, it's coming up on 8, and I got a few things to do. So I didn't want to make the show a semi-weekly show. Is that right? Bi-weekly, semi-monthly. So here we are, 2 weeks in a row. It's been a while since we've done that, I think. I might even have to select out that little, death camp rant and maybe post that separately or something. Because I don't think I'm quite sure I've never been that angry on the air. I've studied a lot. I've studied the death camps a lot. I've studied Himmler a lot, Hitler a lot, Goering a lot. Not Goering, although Goering's a tougher one to pin down. Goebbels I've read two biographies of Himmler, multiple biographies of Hitler. And I've spent a lot of time studying the death camps. And the final thing I'll just say about the death camp thing, because I will probably set it aside and run it as a little separate thing with a content warning, because I'm not bleeping anything out. The thing that's most shocking to me about these death camps, just to wrap this show up, is this. Virtually everybody has seen Auschwitz. And they've seen the aerial views of Auschwitz. And Auschwitz, Bismarck interprets, thank you, Adam Czasowski. So everybody's seen Auschwitz, and they've seen the panoramas of Auschwitz, and they've seen all the the barracks and the huge amount of area that it covers, and then and all this other stuff. But the thing that blew my mind, and this is only a year or two ago, was Treblinka. And Treblinka blew my mind because Treblinka is the size of a smallish interstate rest stop, two gas stations and a McDonald's. And Sobibor was smaller, and Belzec was smaller than that. Belzec, you could easily fit Belzec into a Walmart. And so I just want to make this point. The thing that's so shocking about those camps, see, Auschwitz, people talk about a concentration camp, and they'll talk about a concentration camp as if it was a death camp, but there's a big difference between them. A lot of people died in concentration camps because the conditions in concentration camps were appalling. People died of sickness and disease in concentration camps, and people died through brutal punishment and executions, random executions, and that kind of thing. But there's a difference between a concentration camp and a death camp. Dachau was a concentration camp. Bergen-Belsen was a concentration camp. Buchenwald was a concentration camp. Ravensbrück was a concentration camp. Auschwitz was a concentration camp and a death camp. Most of these concentration camps were work camps. People were worked to death. It was the purpose. You would send people into these labor camps, and they'd work them until they died. So it's needless to say, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people died in these concentration camps, but they weren't death camps. And the thing that's so interesting about it is that Auschwitz is the one camp that everybody names. Auschwitz is both. Auschwitz was a work camp and a death camp. Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec were death camps. And that's all they did. And the thing that's so shocking about them is the size of them. And the reason the size of them was so small was because they didn't have to house anybody. This is the thing about Treblinka that blew my mind. And Treblinka is the biggest of the three of these Action Reinhardt camps. Treblinka is so small, and they came on the scene. They were only there for about a year, and then they were destroyed. They were plowed into the ground. The foundations are still there. We know where everything was. We can find them, but they covered them up as best they could, and then they got out of there. And when I first saw a map of Treblinka, I saw it on BBC special on Auschwitz, I want to say, on the death camps. And I looked at this aerial photograph, and then I saw the scale of it, and it stunned me how small it was. And they would send in these transports of trains with maybe 1,500, 2,000 people on them, and they could process 2,000 people every 2 hours. So they would do 2,000 people, 1,500, 2,000 people would be a slow day. That would be one transport. They might do 4 or 5 transports a day. They might kill as many as 6,000 people in one day at Treblinka, just simply eliminating the ghettos at Lodz, I think, and elsewhere in Poland. And so these people would get off the train, and they made a false train station. They didn't call it Treblinka because rumors had passed about Treblinka. They had a clock on the wall. It was painted on. And that was the first clue. Yeah, look, there's a clock. It's a train station. But the clock isn't a real clock. It's painted on the wall. And then these people would get out of the train, and they'd be led past barbed wire, but the barbed wire had foliage in it, so they couldn't see what was on the other side. They'd go into an area the size of like I said, the size of a couple of gas stations. And there'd be a barracks for women to undress. The men would undress outside. They would take the men first, because if the women went first and they heard the screams of the women, they might get uprisings, and there were some uprisings and people trying to fight back. They'd take the men first, they'd line them down this narrow little corridor, and by the time they were naked, see, this is the thing, it's easy to talk about resistance as Americans, and we are certainly more cantankerous than European Jews were. We simply wouldn't go the way that they went, largely because we knew what happened. But one of the things that they mentioned was they would strip you naked. And just think about being naked out in a group of people, naked out on the street. And think about just that one simple psychological thing. I'll probably splice this together with the other segment. Think about what being naked would do to your ability to resist. I mean, it's easy. I'd fight him anyway. I'd fight him anyway too, but being naked would be a big difference. And so while they get off the trains, this cycle would happen 2, 3, 4, 5 times on a busy day, maybe 5, 6 times. They'd get off the trains, there'd be musicians playing. And they'd be told that this is just a simple stop for them to get some food and maybe get a shower or something. And you would believe it because you'd want to believe it. You'd believe it because you had to believe it. You'd be terrified to believe it. And so they've got the music, and you're scared, and everybody's terrified. But there are people telling you, don't worry, it's just a delousing station. And then they'd get you naked, and then everything would change. All of a sudden, people start screaming, "Rouse, rouse, rouse, move, move, move," and they'd start butting people with rifle butts and knocking their teeth in, or just shooting people randomly, just shooting on the spot. There was a guard at Treblinka who used to specialize, not making this up, folks, used to specialize in finding little babies and tearing them apart. He'd pick them up by the legs and just rip them in half. And he'd take little kids and he'd bash them against the wall. Just bash their heads against the wall and kill them. Why would he do that? Because by this point now, when you see this, you're in a state of stunned, shocked horror. And so you're walking along, and some guy steps out of line, grabs a little 2-year-old girl up in front of you and picks her up by the feet and smashes her brains against a wall. Move, move, move. And there are dogs snapping and barking. A dog at Treblinka was trained to attack people's genitals. So this dog is in there too. You're going to run down that chute. And you can't see anything on either side. It's very narrow. It's probably 2 or 3 people wide. It's covered with sand. They cover it up with sand because then they could get rid of the blood and the urine and the feces and all the other things that were happening. And they push you down what the Germans called the stairway to heaven. And you're going down this foliage on both sides, and there's guards up above, and you're being beaten and whipped. And up ahead, you turn the corner, and there's a stone structure with stairs leading up to it, and there's a cross of David over the top. And you're thinking, well, there's a cross of David. Maybe it's a temple. Maybe it's a cleaning room. And unlike Auschwitz, where they had a lot of time to process you, they simply just marched you in this. And then at Treblinka, there were 5 rooms on each side, center corridor, 5 smallish rooms, and they would put you in there, probably 200 or 300 people, and they pack you in so tight that you couldn't resist anymore. They literally had to force the doors closes on you. They bolt the doors, fill up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, get them all 5 filled up. And then at Treblinka, they didn't use Zyklon B. They used a couple of tank engines from Panzer tanks, generate a lot of diesel fuel, and they'd use carbon monoxide, and people would start screaming, and they'd scream for 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the weather. I think they said in certain conditions, and I for the life of me can't remember whether it was cold or warm, it might take as little as 5 minutes or as long as 20. And slowly people just began to be quiet. And then at Treblinka, you would go in through the inside corridor, they'd poke you into these rooms, but the outside of the rooms had these giant doors, and they'd pull these bars up, these planks up, and the doors would open out so that the bodies would come out. But they'd been packed in there so tight that more often than not, the bodies wouldn't come out because they're packed in there like sardines. They had to get hooks and pull people out. And then once they got enough people out, then the rest of them would fall out. And they said that when they found people that were embracing each other, like a mother embracing their child, they didn't even try to separate them because it was too much work and effort. And by the way, I'm going to do a movie about Treblinka one day. And one of the most horrific things about the Treblinka thing was that they had Jewish Sonderkommandos, people who they selected because they were strong and healthy, to run this thing. And they would talk about, they would say, you will pick up these bodies and throw them in the pit. And if you're too slow, we'll shoot you. And often they wouldn't shoot you, just push you into the fire pit. And this happened for about a year, a little less for some camps. They opened Kelmo, which was, just as I said, just kind of an abandoned kind of a manor house where they had a basement and they hooked up a couple of diesel trucks of fumes in there, and that's where they started working on this gassing technique. But right afterwards, after they'd already put this in plan, Heinrich had put this in effect with Himmler. But Heydrich was assassinated in 42, I want to say, in Czechoslovakia. So they called it Operation Heinrich, and they opened up Belzec, which was a death camp, and then they opened Sobibor, and then they opened Treblinka. And these 3 camps together probably killed 2 million people, maybe a little more, about 900,000 at Treblinka, probably 300,000 at Belzec, and probably 700,000 at Sobibor. And they're so small. They're so tiny. They're just so small. Because there's something terrifying about that, to me anyway. It's what really affected me so much, was when you see Auschwitz. Auschwitz has I don't want to say there's a gravity to it. There's a size. If you're going to murder millions of people, you would expect it would look like that. And you'd expect to see rows and rows and rows of barracks and the giant metal crematoria, the concrete crematoria, and the underground gas chambers, and the smoking chimneys. It looks like a factory. That's what it is. Auschwitz looks like a factory. It looks like a factory where you murder people. But Treblinka was just a clearing. It was just a clearing in the woods in Poland, and they killed damn near 1 million people there. And they didn't cremate them. They didn't have giant ovens at Treblinka. They dug pits with excavators and pushed the bodies in. They buried 400,000 or 500,000 of them. And then after Himmler visited Treblinka, as the Soviets were starting to win the war, because they started this thing before Stalingrad, but after Stalingrad they began to realize, you know what, we may miss this one. And so Himmler then basically said, while Treblinka was still in operation, I assume this is true for Belzec and Sobibor, but I know it's true at Treblinka, after they had 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 people in the ground decaying in these death pits, Himmler said, you got to dig them all up and burn them. And there was a German Nazi officer, and they called him the artist. And they called him the artist because he had one particular skill in life, and his skill was he knew how to burn human bodies. It's not as easy as it may sound. You can throw all the diesel fuel you want on a human body, but getting them to burn, thousands of them a day, is not easy. So, what the artist figured out was the way that you would do it is you would take these, you dig a deep pit, and then over the bottom of the pit, with some considerable distance off the bottom, you would lay these concrete ties. It's kind of a bit like steel railway ties. It's a grill, basically. And what he realized was you had to lay these concrete ties across, and then you put the women on top, down low, because women have a higher fat content and they burn better. And then you would put the men on top of that. And since you could get air underneath that, you'd get enough airflow to turn this thing into an actual conflagration. And then that's how you could burn thousands of people a day. And the Sonderkommandos, the Jewish prisoners who were working for their lives, and look, you can say whatever you want to. If you see this horror going on and you see bodies being killed and somebody pulls you aside and you're one out of, what's the number, 1 out of 50,000? 1 out of 10,000, they pull you aside and say, you look strong, we're going to let you live for another week, you would take it, even if it meant pulling your relatives out of these things. And that happened many times too. These Sonderkommandos would go into the rooms where the women had, this one guy who survived Treblinka was pulled off a transport, and he was pulled aside and said, he was pulled aside because he was told to say, if somebody asks you anything, tell them you're a bricklayer. They need bricklayers. So they went down the line and said, any of you with any skills? And he said, I'm a bricklayer. They pulled him aside, not because they liked him or because they thought he was strong. They thought he had a useful skill. They thought he wasn't a bricklayer. But he looked like he was dressed in working clothes, so they pulled him aside. So he came there with his family, and they pulled him aside. And then the women went into the long hut, and they were completely disrobed in there. And after the women were taken down the chute and put into the gas chambers and killed, he was told, first thing, his first job was to go into the women's room and pull all the clothes out, because they had a giant sorting area where they sorted all these clothes and all the valuables. And the first thing this guy did when he went in there was he found his sister's yellow coat on the ground with all the other clothes. And he knew this coat. She'd been wearing it. He'd been with her 15, 20 minutes earlier. Found the yellow coat on the ground, scooped it up, saw the giant fire pits in the back, and then he had to go pull bodies out of the back. He didn't have to pull his sister out, but he knew what happened to them, and he somehow managed to survive. And he was one of 5 or 6 people that survived out of 750, 800,000 that were killed. You know, one of the things I wanted to do if I ever make this movie about Treblinka is I want to open with a pachinko machine. You know what those things are? Like a Japanese pinball machine, where balls come down and they hit they've a series of nails driven into it. And they hit a nail, it goes one way or another. And most of them kind of go left, right, left, left, right, 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 left, 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 right, and they go down to the center, and it actually makes a perfect bell curve. But 1 in a million, well, it's not 1 in a million, but very, very, very infrequently, a ball hits that pin and it goes left. It hits the next pin, it goes left. Hits the next pin, goes left. Hits the next pin, it goes left. Hits the next pin, it goes left. Never goes right, just by sheer randomness. It goes left, 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 left. And it's the one ball out of the thousands of balls that's outlying on the far side. And I would use that to show that the guy who survived is just plain lucky. He's just lucky. And I would tell the story of this guy. And, you know, this is what they saw. And the part I was getting to is when they realized they had to burn them after they buried them, they brought in they're photographs of these things, these giant excavators. And the Sonderkommandos had to dig up pits with 350,000 rotting bodies in them, and then take these bodies by hand over to the fire pits and toss them in, as well as the new people that were being burned every day. So you'll forgive me if I get a little upset at guys like, what's his name, for saying that this didn't happen, that the Jews caused it, and that they started the war against the Germans, because I know what happened in those camps. I may be one of the few people in America today who has a pretty good idea about what happened in those camps. And I'm not going to let guys get away with saying it didn't happen, because those people were real people. They're as real as you are, and they're as real as your family is. They're as real as anybody else that you know or that you are. And they had names, and they had faces, and they screamed, and they prayed, and they died. And you don't get to say that didn't happen in my presence, because I know what happened there. And that's what happened there. So, there you go. I've never enjoyed banning anybody as much in my entire life as I did that. I'll probably put the 2 concentration camp things together and make a separate little thing out of it, because not because there's something about the ramp that I thought was particularly attractive. I just think that people need to know about this. And if you are curious to know about it, you want to know about it, look up. I think you can find it on Apple Books, Surviving Treblinka. And by the way, if you really this is something you can find online, and I can't recommend this highly enough. This is something you really should go do right now. It's not a long read. It's probably 20 pages. Look up, do a Google search for Treblinka and Vasily Grossman, VasilygRossman. Vasily Grossman wrote a novel about the Soviets called Love and Fate. What a tremendous book this is. But Grossman was a journalist for the Red Army. He was a reporter for the Red Army. He was in Treblinka probably three or 4 days after it was liberated. He was there. He interviewed people who saw this stuff. And look up Vasily Grossman and Treblinka. I think the article's called "The Hell That Is Treblinka." It's about 25 pages, and it will tell you exactly what I told you, and it will tell you about cases of people resisting, and it'll give you an idea of what it's like. And then Grossman, in his book Love and Fate, follows 30 different people in that book, and one of them is a school teacher who is on a transport to a camp, and I'm pretty sure it's Auschwitz. I'm quite sure it's not Treblinka or Sobibor or Belzec. And he talks about how this woman always wondered what the person who was going to kill her would look like. She on some level could understand that at some point in her life she was likely to be murdered, and who would that person be? What were they like when they were boys, and how far away was this convergence? And she's sent on to transport. She meets this little boy who's all alone, and he's scared, and she didn't have any kids, and she treats this boy as her son, and she's trying to comfort him, and they get through the business of having their head shaved, and they're marched naked, and as they're marching into this gas chamber, they see this Nazi brute with a whip, and he's grinning and snapping his whip at people, and she looks at this man, and she says, here we are together, thank you, here we are. And so she looks at him, and he sneers at her, and in she goes. And this is what I thought was so awful about Schindler's List. Yeah, the hell of Treblinka. So awful, so cheap about about Schindler's List. It's possible that it happened in real life, but I frankly don't believe it. I thought it was such a cop-out. And the only part of the movie I didn't like is that it was a terrific movie. But in Schindler's List, the women are sent off to a camp, and they're accidentally sent to Auschwitz. And all the women in the movie who we've gotten to know are sent into a gas chamber at Auschwitz, and they look up and water comes out, and it turns out it's a shower, and their lives are saved. I don't know if that actually happened. I can't imagine that it did. I don't believe it. It was such a cop-out. I think probably what Spielberg was trying to do was show what happened in the gas chambers. But the reason I hated it so much is because it was the cavalry riding to the rescue. And in Grossman's book, in Love and Fate, this woman and this boy go into this gas chamber, and there is no cavalry. It's not a mistake, and the water doesn't come out. They hear this rattling sound, and they see these crystals drop into this steel cage, and people are screaming, and they're clawing at the walls, and she says it's getting harder and harder to breathe, and she looks down, and the boy is getting harder to breathe, and he's a little boy. So boys die first the same reason that canaries die first. Smaller creatures go first. And she says the boy became a doll, and she put her arms around him, and she became a doll herself. They were two dolls holding each other in this room where nothing was alive anymore. And that's what I loved about that book, was that you follow somebody into the gas chamber, and they don't come out alive. They don't get rescued. They don't survive to tell the tale. They join the other million people or so that went in there and never came out again. And in the hands of a great writer, and Grossman is one of them, in the hands of a great writer, you will feel like you were in the gas chamber. You won't know it. You won't know it viscerally. You won't know it enough so that you loose your bowels or anything, but you will have a sense of what it must have been like for those people. And it's a terrific book. It's a hard read. It's tough to follow, but I recommend it very highly. And put that aside whether you want to read Love and Fate or not. Read The Hell That Is Treblinka by Vasily Grossman. As I say, it's basically is an article for the Red Army. By the way, he does a lot of bragging about the Red Army, and in Love and Fate he talks about how many people the communists killed, but he basically talks about the Red Army as a force of liberation, and I don't think you can really deny it in that particular case. And just read what happened. It's all over the place. It's all over the place on the internet for free. Somebody just tells me a Guatemalan water snake says that Ustream comment thing filters out the word Nazi and Hitler. Well, how about that? God knows we can't have an adult discussion about anything here without somebody stepping in to make sure that we don't have any ideas that may be painful to talk about. That, if that's true, and I don't have any reason to doubt that it's true, then that's just appalling. Anyway, that's an hour and 59 minutes and 40 seconds, and we'll do a 2-hour show, and that'll be that. So, yeah, I do get a little cranked when people say it didn't happen. And I mostly, while I don't like the idea that the murderers are exonerated by miserable lowlife swine like that guy, the one thing I will not tolerate is that the victims, I'm not going to let the victims go. I'm not going to let them be forgotten. It seems like I said love and fate. I'm sorry. Thank you, Zachariah Tiemens. It's Life and Fate. Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. But just look up The Hell That's Treblinka, and if that's enough for you, then go ahead and rent the book. Get the book on a download. But read The Hell That Is Treblinka. People say it's a bummer to listen to. I don't think it's a bummer. I mean, it passes bummer, doesn't it? I mean, this kind of passes, boy, depressing or drag. It's important. It's essential. You need to hear these things, and you need to know about them. And I'm very grateful that I'm very grateful that I went to the trouble to find this stuff. Nobody taught me this stuff. I went looking for it. I'm grateful about that because I'm glad I know about it, and I'm glad I'm able to tell some other people about it because it needs to be said. Okay. Well, in any event, that'll do it for the Stratosphere Lounge, the happy, cheery edition of the death camps of the Third Reich edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. You never can tell what's going to wander in through the door here. And that's what makes the show interesting. That's why live is interesting. So that'll do it for episode 111, and I'd love to see you next week. Hopefully I have some flying video and a little more upbeat stuff, and we'll see. So thanks again for joining us. Those of you that are members, as always, I always like to thank the members for keeping the lights on here in the Stratosphere Lounge. And until episode 112, you be careful out there, and don't take any wooden nickels. Okay, we'll see you. Bye-bye.